Ray knew where she was. The private clinic stretched around her in a silence that was too perfect, the kind of silence that didn't comfort but watched. The walls were pale. The light was soft, never harsh. Everything had been designed not to disturb a weakened body. She had arrived conscious, weak but lucid. Lucid enough to understand that this place was not an ordinary hospital. Lucid enough to know who was paying for her to be there. She stared for a moment at her hands resting on the wheelchair's armrests. Her fingers were no longer trembling. At least, not today. She had learned to live with this diminished body, to accept this slower rhythm, this new dependence. What she could not accept was the rest.
My lady.
Alyssa's voice rose behind her, gentle, respectful, almost familiar. Ray did not turn her head immediately. Alyssa had been there from the beginning, since the manor, since her awakening. She had never allowed herself to call her by her first name. She never would.
Everything is ready for today,
she added calmly. Ray inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement. Speaking was not an option. She knew it, they all did. She had tried many times, enough to understand that her voice no longer obeyed her. Sometimes a breath would rise, sometimes a broken sound, but never a word, and yet she could still feel the sentences inside her. Whole, structured, alive. It was almost crueler than silence. Alyssa stepped forward to adjust a blanket over her legs. Her gesture was precise, measured. Ray watched closely her reflection in the window across from her. She was pale, thinner, but her gaze remained intact. Alyssa hesitated then. It was barely perceptible, but Ray saw it.
my lady. If you are tired, we can shorten the session if you wish.
Ray finally turned her head toward her. Her gaze was clear, decisive. No. She had not come this far to shorten anything. Alyssa nodded without insisting. She knew how to read that look. The session began. It consisted of simple exercises, light stimulation, and carefully measured attempts at movement. Ray cooperated, without enthusiasm, without resistance. She knew this treatment was part of the agreement. What she did not yet know was how far it extended. At one precise moment, without apparent cause, a sensation passed through her. Not pain, not fatigue, something more intimate. A sudden calm, too precise to be natural, as if an invisible tension had just been released. Ray frowned almost imperceptibly. It was not the first time she had felt it. Since her stay at the manor, there had been these strange moments when everything felt easier, smoother, but she did not like it. She closed her eyes briefly, and without warning, an image forced itself upon her. Not a clear memory, an ancient sensation, the warmth of a presence too close, an intensity that left no room for doubt. She inhaled deeply. When she opened her eyes again, the session was over.
You did well, my lady.
Alyssa said with a faint smile. When she returned to her room, a surprise was waiting silently for her. On the table, beside her bed, something was waiting. Ray saw it immediately. The watch. She did not need to pick it up to know. She recognized the dark leather, the slightly worn case. She also remembered these years, 20 years. She picked it up anyway. The familiar weight settled against her wrist. Exactly like before. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't possible. This watch she knew too well. And that should never have been here. 20 years. 20 years since she had last seen him. And suddenly, the images returned. Not like tender memories. Like fragments she seemed to relive through her still weakened body. Those nights too intense, yet addictive. That silent waiting that pierced her soul. Those words she had never dared to tell him. And then, overnight, nothing. Abandonment. Without explanation. A cold anger rose inside her. Not explosive. Cold, contained. Why now? Why here, after all this time? Why her? She slowly lifted her eyes toward Alyssa. The young woman lowered her gaze. She knew. Ray tightened her grip on the object. A thought crossed her mind. He had no right. She closed her eyes, and the sensation returned. The same one she had felt during her rehabilitation session. That invisible presence. Silent. As if someone, somewhere, had always known she would recognize it in the end.